We're going to talk about where Moses met God in Exodus 19 this morning. I'd like you to turn your Bibles to Exodus 19. Look at it in a moment. I hope today that we can get a more balanced view of who God is. I think sometimes we're very familiar with God as how He's revealed in Jesus Christ. And that's good. But I also believe that sometimes we simply see God more like the humanity of Jesus Christ, more like a man. And we simply look at Him like a man rather than looking at Him as a holy God. Some seem to make God so small and familiar today that they kind of see Him as like, a benevolent Santa Claus. And if He's looking at you, and if you're nice, He's going to be nice to you. And if you're naughty, He's going to be mean to you. That's not who God is. We need to see God in the balance of who Jesus is and who He was as we see Him in the Old Testament. It's the same God. We need to see His power. We need to see His glory. We need to see worship His majesty and His holiness. So there are many instances recorded in the Bible where God spoke to His people. But there are fewer biblical examples of where God actually appeared and showed Himself in what we sometimes refer to as a theophany form. A theophany is where God takes on the form of a human being, or comes in the form of fire, or comes in a cloud, and shows Himself and manifests Himself and appears to man. And usually the reaction He received was the same. This reverent awe. This standing in fear before His holiness. And that's how we see Him pictured often in the Old Testament. For example, in Joshua fell on his face to the earth, it says in Joshua 5:14, and he bowed down. He realized suddenly that he was conversing face to face with God, and he just falls down before Him. And then in Isaiah 6, 1-5, we're told how God worked and appeared to Isaiah. And in Isaiah chapter 6, I believe it is, Isaiah 6, 1-5. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a throne, high and exalted. The train of His robe filled the temple. Above Him were seraphs, each with 6 wings. 2 with wings they covered their faces. With 2 they covered their feet. With 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of His glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and the threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried. I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips. I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. That's what Isaiah's reaction was when God appeared to him. And today I want us to see how God revealed Himself to Moses, and hopefully that will help us if we have some kind of distorted view of God or some half-hearted view of His grace. God comes, this same awesome God that Moses met on Mount Sinai. He's the God that's worthy of all adoration, of all our worship, of all our the God that we worship today. And we see that this righteous God commands his people to come to him prepared to hear and to obey. And thankfully, there are guidelines in this passage about how we're to prepare and meet God on a regular basis. So let's read about it. Let's turn to Exodus 19. In God's Word, we're looking at it on the screen. Exodus 19, begin verse 1. We'll read through 1 through 15, how they're getting ready for meeting with God. In the third month, after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the house of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, "I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you." Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, 'Be careful that you do not go up the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. He shall surely be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on him. Whether man or animal, he shall not be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast, may they go up to the mountain.'" After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. Then he said to the people, "Prepare yourselves for the third day. Abstain from sexual relations." I'd like to stop there for a moment and just remind us of, when we go back, you remember that Moses was shepherding Jethro's flock, his father-in-law's flock, in the desert, and this was in Midian. And the Lord spoke to Moses from a burning bush. And then the Lord told Moses after that, after the Exodus took place, that he would come and worship at Mount Sinai. And God explained to Moses that this would be a sign of his continued presence. And that's what we read in Exodus 3. And you probably remember when we read this, Exodus 3, verse 12. And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." And now, that's happening. The people have been delivered, and now he's actually there, and they're going to worship God before that mountain there. And this is 3 months after the Hebrews were delivered from their bondage in Egypt. They came to the desert of Sinai, just as God had promised. And after their arrival, God's now preparing them to worship. And so God's plan involved two basic steps, and we're going to look at them. Leading them right up to the place requiring of them certain commands and requirements. The first specific thing is the place where they met. Generally, the location was the desert of Sinai. Specifically, the spot was Mount Sinai, one of these several huge granite barren mountains in that barren region. The text says that Israel set up camp in front of this mountain. Verses 1 and 2, in the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day they came to Mount Sinai, after they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. And then, so there's a specific place they were to meet with God. And then there were specific requirements for coming before God. Once these 2 million plus people, think of it, were settled in, Moses made this difficult journey up the side of this mountain to meet with God. And during several meetings with the Lord, Moses received this list of requirements of what the people had to do if they were going to be prepared to meet with God. And the first one, they had to be willing to obey. They had to be willing to obey. The Lord spoke to Moses and commanded him to convey these words to Israel. Verse 5. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. And then we read in verse 7. So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." Wow. You think God appreciates that kind of response? We will do everything the Lord has said. Now, with this commitment made, Moses goes back to the mountain and tells God what the people had said. Now, when you think of it, why should God bother to speak to us or show us His will or reveal more to us unless we have that willingness to obey? You know, I have a navigation system on my phone. And when I first got it, my son kind of talked me into it because he wanted it really bad. And he said, "Dad, I heard they got a 2-for-1 deal. And you could just give me the second one for Christmas." So anyway, made sense. But you know, when I first started using this thing, and I was in Minneapolis, I didn't want to listen to it. I said, "That can't be right." You know? And so I wouldn't listen to the navigation system and get lost because I didn't trust it. You know? And, you know, that's how we are a lot of times with God. So why should we expect when we go to God and we're not really trusting Him and we're probably not going to listen anyway, why do you think God would reveal His will or His plan to us? No, He wants us to come trusting Him with a heart that's open to Him. That's what He desires of us. And we can't come, "Well, God, you know, I'll obey if it's convenient." Or, "I'll obey if it fits in with my plan."